Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back, everybody. If you've ever considered writing a book, fiction, nonfiction, but maybe apprehensive because you don't know how to get it done, where to turn, maybe engage a publishing company, but not sure which one, there is one that's radically different. It's called NFB Publishing. And I just saw that after all these podcasts with the man behind it and authors along the way, I just saw this on the website for NFB, and I want to read it because it kind of says everything. The central idea of NFB is community, not corporation. The author, the artist, the editor, the agent, all those involved working toward a common goal to produce the best books ever, or even just a really good book. I think it says it all there. Mark Pogodzinski is the man behind NFB, very particular about the process and keeping that community feel with everything. And we're going to learn more about that process today. Mark, how you doing?
Good, Steve. How are you?
Fantastic. Love it when we get together and you always bring company. Who do we got?
Today we have the author Jack Livingston, who's written 2 books, memoirs. And what sets his books apart is even obviously you don't know the subjects of the books until you start reading. But by the time you're done with the book, you have a complete understanding of the person. You feel that you know them. And there's a connection between you and this absolute stranger through the book, through reading all about the anecdotes and all the interesting things that have happened, that you get a true understanding of a fellow human being. And I think that's the strongest point of Jack's writing.
Awesome. Welcome, Jack.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. That's great to hear. Yeah, glad to be here.
Your books are very personal, and one of them is about a childhood friend, and the other one is about your dad. Want to talk about both? Which one do you want to start with?
We'll start with the first one. So a lot like fun, only different is the title of the book. It's also a catchphrase that we used as friends to describe a lot of the adventures and hijinks that we went on, because sometimes there was pain involved or a crash or whatever. So we always would say, this is a lot like fun, only different. And Chris Kelly is my childhood friend. And unfortunately, gosh, it's got to be 10 years ago now, he has frontotemporal degeneration, which if you follow Bruce Willis, that's exactly what Bruce Willis has. And so this book is not really about a disease, it's about friendship. And didn't even start out as a book. I didn't want to forget all these memories I had. And a lot of people would say to me, how did you remember all these things? I said, well, you read the book. If you were in them, you couldn't forget them, because that's the kind of adventures we had with Chris. So there's 24-hour mountain bike races. There's canoe trips down the Battenkill River. There are snowshoe climbing up in the high peaks of the Adirondacks, these type of things. Those were our adventures, just to name a few. And Chris, as a person, had a very unique childhood. I don't know if you want me to stop there. You want me to just keep rolling?
No, it's you know what? This is what I love about talking about. Everybody has a story. Actually, there's a story in anything. Go to Starbucks,
sure. Pick
up a coffee. There's a story there. Believe it or not, there's something going on. Might not be a big story, but there's a story. And as we listen to you, I'm seeing pictures of my friends and my childhood, and on up from teens into 20s and all of that, and so many different scenarios, situations. How do we get through with that one without unscathed, and on and on and on? So please continue.
Yeah. So, Chris, actually, I knew Chris since high school days. We played soccer together and things like that. But frankly, I stayed away from Chris because most of the things he was involved with, I kind of felt like there was a chance of getting arrested. I'm sure my parents wouldn't. Chris lived on the edge.
Well, I'm gonna, if I may interject here, I left out that part when I was talking about my friends. Mostly, it comes up. How are we not in jail, and how are we still alive? I'm just saying.
You should read this book. But Chris, despite that, I mean, Chris was the kind of guy where he would just give it to anybody. I mean, he lived life without filters, but he would also be the guy that, just as an example, I mean, we had one of our rides and I knocked myself unconscious and I had all kinds of injuries. I had a separated shoulder. I rode kind of somewhat my bike out of there, mainly walked. And of course, we also had a phrase or a catchphrase, which was, and some people take offense to this, but if it wasn't spinal damage, everything else above that was funny. So it didn't matter what happened to you. That's where we drew the line. And so this was hilarious to him, but he was the only guy that called me up later on to make sure I was okay. So, these are the kind of things Chris did. I mean, Chris was also kidnapped when he was 5 or 6 years old by his father and taken across the country. There was a situation between his mother and father, and I didn't necessarily even think I was going to dig into that, but his mom told me the story, and I was there with the family, and it was like, wow, it was like taking a Band-Aid off it was more than a Band-Aid. It was like taking a tourniquet off of a really deep wound. And Chris raised a pig in the village of East Aurora in his backyard, which caused a lot of consternation with his neighborhood and all that sort of things. Just, standard things that we all have done, raised pigs on our backyard. And smoke bomb incident at the high school when I was a senior that cleared out the entire high school, which wouldn't be as funny today. I mean, he probably would, that's just not the culture now. But so that's the book with Chris. And, I wrote it as if Chris was going to read it. Chris is still with us. So I also look at it. We didn't understand what this was because nobody had heard of frontotemporal degeneration. And we started actually getting mad at Chris because it was just his behavior was so bizarre. And if we had known what this was, we would have been had a little more empathy toward it.
And when did his journey with that begin? Well,
I'm going to say it's about 10 years ago.
Okay.
But it's hard to say when does something like that start, right? And with Chris, without the filters to begin with, that's part of frontotemporal degeneration. There's just a lot of things. I mean, Chris no longer speaks. At one point, he was doing yas and stuff like that. But so he's got aphasia. He does not speak. If he sees me, he knows who I am. He'll laugh. And but we're out there every Tuesday. Still, we do a little hike with him. And I think the exercise and the things that he's doing, he's got a tremendous family around him. That's wow. Why when you get diagnosed, I think it's like 2 to 8 years and things start shutting down. So that's that book. It's a fun book. There's just great stories in there, but it's kind of back and forth. Chris now and Chris that I used to know and things like that remind me. But it was fun to work on.
What do you want people to take away in reading that book or considering reading a book? And again, resonates with me, friends and back when we were younger and those antics and all of that.
Yeah, great question. I mean, for starters, as I said, to get an understanding what this disease is, because it's starting to get a lot of understanding with, so Bruce Willis's wife, Emma Willis, just recently published a book, but it's not about Bruce Willis's life. It's really a caregiver's guide is what it is. And of course, she's Emma Willis and I'm Jack Livingston. And I actually sent them a book. I didn't hear from them, but, I thought, hey, maybe you might want to read these things. If I saw somebody playing Chris in a movie, it probably would be somebody like Bruce Willis. But so I want them to understand the disease a bit, although I don't really talk about the disease. You see the disease because you see, some of the things, some of Chris's behavior in that. But secondly, just what you're saying that, hey, these are like great. We've all got these great stories. Not everybody's going to write a book, but we always tell our stories to each other. I've got a great group of friends that I've known for some of them 60 plus years, and we just are always telling our stories. And maybe that's not exactly how it happened, but that's how we're telling it now anyways. And to capture them. And that's the second thing with my book about my dad is like, you don't want to forget this stuff. And, maybe you won't write a book, but maybe you'll write, just your own notes or pass it down to your family
or even just do it for yourself. So many counselors,
Absolutely.
therapists, there's a wonderful recognition, understanding, healing in just writing it down, like physically writing and not typing it. They scientifically proven the connection between the mind and the hand makes it real. Like it's tangible. It almost sounds like with the book about your dad, maybe you were doing that.
Well, so we'll jump into that one because this is probably a good segue on that, Steve. So the book about my dad, again, I've got two other fictional stories that I've been working on for 10, 12, 15 years that I got to get over the goal line. So these things have just come along in the middle of that. But with my dad, and I don't, if you've got a dad that you've got a relationship with, my dad was my best friend. It wasn't always that way in high school. I'm sure he wanted to see me hit the highway, but my dad and I had a lot of similar interests, a love of baseball and sports and just all kinds of things. And, so he would tell me stories when he was little, this book is as much as, this is almost a little like a Tuesdays with Maury, only it's with my dad. And the times are so different back in my dad was born in 1936. So these stories go back to the 40s and, times were different then. But Dad would tell me these stories and some of them were, pretty funny and some were just interesting. But never thought about writing a book about him. But we had a really terrible thing that happened that ended up being, the proverbial blessing in disguise. Let's see, my dad passed away last March. So this would have been June of 2022. And so my dad was 86 at the time. My dad, he got himself all around. He's driving. He lived in Boise, Idaho. And so he's coming to visit me in little Hamburg, New York, like he did. Getting his own place because we've got 3 floors. You want to go upstairs where he's going to get a little Airbnb. We've done that. And a couple hours into his stay with me, he fell off my deck. And my dad broke his back. We didn't know he broke his back. His face looked like hamburger. I said, Dad, we got to do something. We got to get you to no, don't, we're not going to do that. Well, I'm just cutting way ahead. About 12 hours later, we were at the hospital and we were finding out he broke his back. And a couple of days later, he was getting, at 86 years old, emergency back surgery.
Wow.
So why I tell you all that is because that's how I said, Dad, I think we got a lot of time before you head back. Why don't we start working on some of those, just something to kill time, these stories. So we came up with a list of stories and we just started working on them. And my dad, I remember he said to me, we were sitting on the front porch, he goes, I'm really enjoying this. And him just reminiscing and telling these stories. We never finished them all. And, we were getting to the end and he was just running out of gas. He just, and he had such a great memory on stuff. But that's how this started. And, so my dad read a lot of these stories. But one that the first chapter of this book is one that he didn't read. And I'm hoping he can read it from wherever he is, because I used to, my first son-in-law would call him Mr. Magoo. So if you know who Mr. Magoo is way back when, that's in my era. When his eyes were like slits and you couldn't see. And he's like, oh, Magoo, you've done,
Mm-hmm.
My dad would laugh so hard, his eyes, you couldn't see his eyes. So that book, which is called, At Any Rate, That's My Dad, because every time Dad's told a story, it would be, well, at any rate, he'd be going off in all kinds of different directions, like I maybe do once in a while. And I said, Dad, well, what about this? And he'd say, well, yeah, at any rate. But
Isn't
anyway,
it funny
that
that people from that generation always had those little placeholder phrases? Because again, it's coming back to me. My grandmother always used to say, and she had an Irish accent, well, the whole trouble is, and then go into a story. Now, it could be about the best thing in the world. It's, well, the whole trouble is.
Yeah.
But they had.
Yeah. Well, that's, Yeah, so that was his thing, and luckily I recorded a lot of these. I just have all that. I didn't want I can hear my dad, but I was on to a track there. Oh, so the chapter 1 starts out. It began in the middle 60s and continued through the middle 70s. A man and his wife made numerous attempts to rid themselves of their children, especially their older son, and that's me. And these are, as a child, all the ways that we feel like maybe you might have gone through this, that our parents are trying to get rid of us because they were making us do things as kids that we didn't want to do, and that you can fill in the blank for all those things. But, so I talk about how, if you know what jarts are, right, they don't even have jarts anymore. Here, play with the jarts. Do you know what a jart is? Jart is a long dart.
Got a metal tip.
You know what those are, Mark?
Yeah, it was a long game, and they had like a fletch on them, and you throw them up in the air, and they had a metal tip. They became illegal because the whole point was to throw it high enough and have it land in a circle, like, I don't know, 10 feet, 20 feet away. And they were great weapons for your siblings when you got into it. And you're like, you'd go
I remember
throw a dart.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that big.
They were huge. So it'd be like, yeah, sure, let's throw these up in the air as high as we can, and maybe these will come down through the center of Jack's skull. But, it's just one example. Again, I don't think my parents were trying to do that, but, or riding my bike up Jewett-Homewood Road, which is a road here that there's no way I would ever have one of my kids ride up this road on your bike. It's just not where you ride a bike. It's super dangerous. But that was the time period, So these are just my observations of my dad, and they're just funny, quirky things like you might have had with your dad, and it's spliced in with all these great stories he told me. There's a lot of baseball stories. I mean, some of the stories are ones that I was involved with when I got older, but a lot of them are things that, I didn't know. So this whole fall, off my deck, it was just a horrible, horrible thing. And, he never was quite exactly the same again, but he did recover from it enough that he, let's see, my younger daughter got married in 2023 in Buffalo, and he was able to get back and participate. I think there's one picture in the book where he's dancing with my daughter at the wedding. It's a miracle, really, quite frankly, So it was a fun one to work on. And, for our family, we have these stories that we now will never forget because they're written down.
Do you want people to look at that book about your dad, Jack, and have them reflect? Have them take the time, maybe even to talk to their parents, or just look at the history of their parents, because it seems like that happened for you. Some of those stories you said you weren't even aware of.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have, again, there's some people that I know, mainly, but there's other people that I've never met until they got the book, that have said, this is, whether they're going to write a book, I don't know, but they are going to, I said, hey, just sit down with your parents and talk about it and record the stories. So you just, that's easy enough to do. And we have a Tuesday writers group that's over in East Aurora and hosted by Rick Oler, who has sent a lot of writers over Mark's way, that, whether you know that or not, but maybe I did, I don't know, but they are all a lot of things. We were just last night, or what's today, Thursday, 2 nights ago. A lot of the stories relate around family things like this, and they're just fun little stories. They might not be things that somebody's going to publish, but they're just great little things. And you find out about these people, and regular people have some pretty interesting stories. They really do. So. Yeah, I mean, maybe it inspires somebody to just go, hey, I gotta do this, because all of a sudden one day people aren't there, and I can't tell you how many times I just say, oh man, I would love to ask Dad about this right now, and I can't anymore, and now I'm an orphan now. Unfortunately, that's not a great feeling. So I'm glad I had those stories. It was a lot of fun to work on. It really was, But
were you intending?
Funny little thing with what's that?
I was just going to ask you, were you intending to do that book about your dad and then he fell, or was it the other way around?
No, never. It didn't. None of it happened. The fall, I can still remember in the hospital, and I had a pad. I first started writing them down, and then I said, I gotta do these recordings. It was really a matter for, every day. I'd be okay going to the hospital. I mean, we were supposed to have a lot of fun and do a lot of fun things. And my days while my dad was here was, going to the hospital and being with my dad. And it also, I think it made I would, a better person that, to be, a caregiver for my dad. And, even, he could run his own show. But I mean, I was, washing his feet. I think Jesus might have done that for some people. But I mean, I go, Dad, this is child abuse here. Because you know what? When you're 86 or 7 years old, feet don't look very good.
I always joke around about mine. Like if you're going to trim the nails, the device would be made by Craftsman. But anyway,
yeah.
Mark, when you got these books from Jack, how do you edit something like that? Or how do you work with, because these are very personal, individualized stories. Were there tweaks that needed to be made? How did that go?
Okay, we want to edit the actual writing because the writing is heartfelt, and as you can tell from the interview, but we just want to make it presentable and easily accessible. And I think at any rate, That's My Dad holds a lot of value for people, and maybe Jack doesn't even realize it, that we see our parents as our parents and have this idea of them, but once they get to be a certain age, and we all get to be a certain age also, we become human beings together, and the talking becomes more, it can become more easier, and you learn about them as people rather than your parents, and trying to hurt you with lawn darts back in the day becomes a funny story because you realize that what they were going through, you went through because you've had your own children and you've become a parent. And I think that relationship can grow and become even stronger and more wonderful at that stage. And if you read that book, I hope it would inspire someone to reach out to their parents and like, tell me some stories from your 20s. What were you like before I showed up? And I'm sure we were all wonderful children and perfectly behaved, but maybe some of us had some issues. And like, how did you deal with that? How did my behavior impact your life? And I think when you're older, that becomes an incredibly honest and beautiful conversation. And I think you see that in that book. And then the other book is just antics of guys, doing interesting stuff, but then the one character is slowly deteriorating. And again, the disease exists, but it's also could be age. As we get older, we can no longer do the physical things that made us happy with our friends. So I think the books they're beautiful in a way, they're hopeful in a way, but they're also realistic at the same time.
They're authentic.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all that, Mark.
And you know what this happens a lot when we get together here. I always mention the covers because they're always so fantastic. And I know these are real photographs, but it seems, Jack, that they are the right photographs. The same thing with the fonts, even the names of the books. You just feel it. You feel it. And I think that's all part of it. That's all part of it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you acknowledging it because, a lot of thought went into it, but it really wasn't a tough selection. I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. That picture of Chris is up in the Adirondack Mountains. I know exactly where we were, and that's him. And then if you look at the back cover, it's Chris walking away. Chris today, but really it's Chris about 5 years ago, and that's at Knox Polo Field where we do our hikes. And my dad, that's him sitting on a bridge in Milford, Delaware, when he was probably 7, I don't know, 8 years old. And that bridge, full circle, when I was about that age, we rebuilt that bridge. It was a green bridge. I can still remember. I think I'm just getting the paint out of my hands because it was probably that paint you don't use it. They're not supposed to use. But yeah,
wow.
I remember that. It was a great time.
So wonderful talking with you both. I want to share something that's personal, real quick, about your dad. So my dad I wasn't really super close with him. My parents got divorced when I was very young. I joined a men's group about a year and a half ago and went on a retreat. And it was just, a retreat. You'll learn about life and, move your life forward. one of the exercises was forgiving your dad. Didn't even know it was part of the whole thing. Again, he passed when I was 21. I realized the last day of the 3-day retreat was his birthday. So it's almost as if it was like a reason, but wait, there's more. I've been thinking about him a lot lately. Then you show up, and then we talk about this book. My dad's name is Jack.
Oh, wow.
Can't make it up.
Yeah. Wow.
So
wow.
I got to read the book.
Did he go by Jack, or was he John and called Jack?
No, he's Jack.
Okay.
He's Jack. Yeah. And my middle name is John. Wow. That was his, full name, legal name. But
okay.
Yeah, I believe there are no coincidences, and this is almost like, my dad saying, "Hey, you want to read that book?" So that's on my.
I think it would be great, and if you have some, I'd love to hear what you thought about it, Steve. If you ever want to message me, I love to hear feedback. It's, as a writer, when somebody says something to you, those are pieces of gold. Where a lot of people that have made some nice comments. People aren't going to say bad things, but it really warms you.
I wondered why the title was the title, and even before we got together. Even talking with Mark, it sounds like at any rate, that's my dad. Like, could be perceived as not the best dad, but that's my dad.
Yeah.
Now we understand why he used to say that, and just fantastic. NFBpublishing.com. If you're thinking even toying with the idea of writing a book, start there. This is the way to do it, and with a more personal touch. Thank you both for today, Mark and Jack. I really appreciate it.
Great. Nice to meet you, Steve.
You too.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.